I'm very happy to take questions. Looking forward to your feedback. I can't say this is new work. It's been in progress for a while, but it's new that we're getting feedback on it. So really appreciate your thoughts and questions. This is joint work with a wonderful team that we couldn't have done it without this team. So this is with my collaborators Monira Essa Aloud, Sarah Al Rashid, and Basit Zafar. And Monira and Sarah are both at King Saud University in Riyadh, which was our partner in this project. So as Jamal was saying, the context for this study, we're looking at Saudi Arabia, and question might be, why Saudi Arabia? Well, as Jamal mentioned, there's basically been a lot of changes in Saudi Arabia, and one that he mentioned is that women are getting more education. But the really kind of striking thing that's going on is you're seeing a lot of change in women entering the labor market. And so if we look at this figure here, so the y-axis is labor force participation among women who are 25 to 34. So you can think of them as a younger cohort. And then the x-axis is women age 45 to 54. So you can think of them as a bit older. And what this is showing you is that here we can see Saudi Arabia is right here, that labor force participation that we kind of know well is very low among this older cohort. So it's only here about 12% or so, I think. But if we look at the younger cohort, so 25 to 34, it's already closer to 40. And so what you can see is that there's a big change. So it's really much higher than the 45-degree line. And so what that's suggesting is that again, there's a lot of changes going on. And so if we look at just kind of labor force participation overall from 1990 to 2018, there's basically been a big increase. It may not look like very much, 14% in 1990, by 2018, 23%, but that's actually a 27% increase in less than a decade. So basically, this is a place where there's a lot of changes going on. And we can see there's some other countries, in this area. I think we can see Egypt is over here, a little closer to the 45. But we think that Saudi Arabia is a very useful place to study this question about how are women making decisions about whether to work or not, or to enter the labor force. So, the question then is, if we look at that older cohort, and then even, if we look at the younger one, it's still relatively low, right, compared to other countries. And so the question is, why is women's labor force participation so low? And if we look to the literature, so there's been, growing literature looking at kind of different explanations for why this is. And what we are going to try to contribute to this literature is we're suggesting that, again, in Saudi Arabia, where you have this, a lot of change going on, you have, social changes, economic changes. And our, question is that in this rapidly changing environment, how are women making these decisions about whether to work or not? And there's a great paper by Raquel Fernandez, who's at NYU in the AER, where she shows that it's this process of intergenerational learning by which women make decisions about whether to enter the labor market or not. And what we are suggesting is that in this context of Saudi Arabia, because there's so much change, women might actually lack information, first of all, about the labor market, because the older cohorts, the older generations aren't working, so they're not getting that information, but also about the social norms. So a big piece of what we're going to look at, and there's been some interesting recent papers that some of you might know about, that social norms seem to matter a lot. And when I say social norms, and we'll get into this more, but I'm really here talking about kind of cultural attitudes about whether women should work outside of the home or not. And so, in many of the countries that have low labor force participation rates, there are these norms or, attitudes about women working outside of the home that there's a stigma that women shouldn't work outside of the home. And so the idea is these are all changing. And so how are women kind of taking that information about the labor market and these norms when they're making their decisions? So we're going to draw on basically this, two key literatures that are growing quite rapidly. So one that some of you might know about is this literature on biased beliefs. And my co-author, Basit Zafar, has been very key in this literature in studying biased beliefs. And when I say biased beliefs, what we're talking about is that when people are making decisions about whether to go to school, for example, get higher education, or to enter the labor market, when they're making those key decisions, they might not have all the information that they need, or we call this incomplete information. And so it's biased because, again, they don't have, their beliefs are not informed by the true state of the labor market. Now, there's, as I said, there's, it's a really rapidly growing literature where some of the early studies, again, you would give parents or students information about, say, the returns to education, right? So if you get more education, how much does that increase your earnings? And there's been some others. So as I said, my co-author Bassett with his other co-authors have a paper where they show that basically if you give students in college information about earnings by different majors or different occupations, students switch majors. So they're responsive to that information. There's some other work, again, showing that parents are responsive. So if you give them information about their children's, kind of potential labor market opportunities, then they might, switch what their children are doing. So there's some pretty compelling compelling literature from these studies that show that students and parents are not fully informed. So this information can actually impact choices. The other literature that I mentioned is this literature on social norms, in particular, how social norms can kind of constrain women's labor force participation. And so there's a great overview piece by Seema Jayachandran, a recent one, where she goes through the different studies and discusses the issues. There's also a few from Saudi Arabia that have been very influential. There's two other recent papers that have looked at social norms. And again, why is Saudi Arabia so interesting? Because again, we have very low labor force participation. You have pretty, we'd say, strong cultural norms about women working outside of the home. And so it's an interesting setting to look at, well, how can we then think about how these norms might be changed or nudged to get women to enter the labor force. And so, the one that has gotten a lot of attention that some of you might have heard about is this recent one that shows that it's actually the families of the women that might actually be misperceiving social norms. So there they did an experiment where they gave husbands of women information about whether the other men, how they feel about their wives working. And what they find is that once the husbands find out that their peers are actually okay with their wives working, they're also more willing to they're okay with their wives working as well. So this is about this misperception. So there's kind of these two literatures that we were looking at, this biased beliefs and the social norms literature. And what we were interested in understanding is, well, what happens when you have the interaction of those two factors here? That you can have information that you can give to women about the returns, say, to entering the labor market. But if you have these social norms that are still going to constrain women's choices, maybe that information won't matter. And so what we wanted to dig into in this study is to understand, when can that information be effective? Is it the case that the information only will work if they're consistent with the social norms? So we're really trying to look at that biased belief literature and take it a bit further to say, okay, it's, under what conditions would this information matter? So that's kind of the general idea in this paper. So what are we going to do? So we're going to, in Saudi Arabia, and I'll give you details on where we did this, but our question is, if we provide information on the pace of progress, and by progress, we're saying again about, kind of the share of women that are wanting to work, can that have an impact on women's labor market aspirations? When I say aspirations, so you'll see in our study, we're really thinking about kind of young Saudi women. What do they believe? What are their expectations about working? And then the second piece of then is, again, that interaction of information and norms. So the second question is, would they still be constrained by their family's expectations and prevailing longstanding social norms? So that's that interaction. Okay, so what did we do concretely? As I said, we collaborated with people at King Saud University, which is a large public university in Riyadh. And we did a survey experiment. And so what we did is we did a survey of about 1,000 women who were bachelor students. And this was done in 2018. So it's a few years ago. And there is a female campus and a male campus, but we really focused here on the female campus because, again, we were interested in understanding, again, the women's aspirations about whether to work or not. And our survey asks quite a few things. Okay, so we ask a lot of questions, but the key things for our study that we're interested in is what their aspirations are, prior to entering the labor market. So here, again, the reason that we think it's useful to look at women's aspirations is because obviously there's demand side factors too. So there's a study I mentioned by Jennifer Peck and her co-authors, where they actually look at the demand side. So what are the constraints of firms? And so if those of you who are familiar with Saudi Arabia, you might know that, there's a lot of issues around having workplaces that allow for, gender segregation so that the men and women can kind of be in separate workplaces. And so they do this study where they look at kind of the cost to firms. So that's on the demand side, but we're really interested in the supply side, isolating that. So before the women actually go into the labor market and kind of, see some of these other constraints, what are their aspirations prior to that? So we're going to measure those aspirations. We also ask some expectations about marriage and fertility, because obviously those are important parts about, important factors in whether women want to work or not. Also about their education experience. Now, the key part of the study is that we're going to randomize within the survey this provision of information, and I'll give you the details in a second, but we're going to give two types of information. We're actually going to bundle that together, and that is the provision of what we call labor market information and social information. There, what you can think about that is kind of telling women, what are wages, what are some other, concrete details about the labor market? And then the social information is about their peers. And so that, I'll get into that in a second. The second thing that we randomize then is we give a subset of the women the same information plus an additional prime that's going to make social norms and family more salient. And so this is kind of, more in the behavioral economics flavor here, where we're trying to make it top of mind what their parents are thinking and expecting. And so what we're really trying to, get into here, and I'm curious, to hear your thoughts on how you would interpret this, but, and I'll show you how we did this in the survey. But the idea with the parents prime is that it should bring to mind the expectations of the student's parents. So here we think that the parents are probably going to have preferences in line with historic gender norms. But you'll see there's a bit of a twist in our results that you'll see with that. So so that's where we're headed. Let me pause for a second. Any questions here? I'll get into the details, but this is the basic design at this point.
I would just add maybe one point here. So for the students here who are following, so basically what is, maybe Ina now will drive through this stage now. So we have like this experiment, and we're trying to divide this population into a group that will receive certain information and a group that will not receive this information, to see whether this information that Ina will be providing students, that she will be calling treatment group, will matter for change their minds or to change their decisions. Mohammed?
So yeah, this is great. So this is a survey experiment, isn't it?
Yes.
Okay. So can you tell me more you give how many treatments were there?
Yes. Yeah. Let me get into, so I'm going to get into the details. So there's two treatment groups and one control. And so I'll get into, so we're going to ask a bunch of questions in the survey that everyone gets the same questions. And then we're going to randomize them into three different groups. And we have one is the control. One gets this labor market and social information, and the other gets the same information plus this parents prime. So that's the third.
Okay.
Yeah.
And was there any incentives, paid or monetary incentives, or any kind of incentives to?
Sorry.
Yeah.
Yeah, so we did, so in order, to basically, if people did the survey, they were entered into a raffle. That was kind of the main
Uh-huh.
incentive, but we didn't give individual, individual, not everyone got an incentive, like a gift card or
Okay.
anything like that. Mhm.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you.
Yes, thank you. Great, and please, thank you for the question. I'll get into the details of kind of what questions we asked in a second. So let me first, before we get there, let me just quickly do a little bit about kind of the setting and why we're doing this at KSU. Because you might think, as Jamal mentioned, right? So a lot more women are getting education, and why are we just focusing on this group of university students at one university? And so, a bit about it, I mentioned this, but KSU is the largest public university in Saudi Arabia. So, it's a big university. It's, very well regarded. It's one of the 2 in the top 150 in the Shanghai ranking. But what we actually thought is, given that there's a few studies now of Saudi Arabia, but no one has really actually looked at, at kind of the aspirations of women. And we were encouraged that if we look at women, who is working right now, it's actually university graduates. So if we think about who are the women who are actually like making decisions now and who are already seeing that their peers are working, it is, the university students. And so we were thinking these might be the women that if we think about our information and this parents prime, they might be the ones for whom this decision is the most relevant at this point, because they're on the margin of deciding whether to enter the labor force. And as Jamal mentioned, this is kind of some numbers here on the increase in education. So tertiary enrollment has increased from 39% in 2010 to 68% in 2017. So it's really been a dramatic increase. And so it's not that it's just a select group of women who are entering the university. You actually have a lot of variation among the university students in terms of their background and et cetera. Okay, so then, let me get into the details now, which you're probably interested in. So what is kind of more specifically about the study design? So as I said, this was about 1,000 students that took this survey online. So it was in a Qualtrics survey in Arabic. And what we did is we first asked students, all the students, kind of the same questions, okay? So we asked them again, their, kind of basic demographics, but also the key was their perceptions of labor market returns, and also about their peers' career and family expectations. So this is important because you'll see one of the interesting results that you're going to see is that we have some very different beliefs about what students believe about the population versus themselves. Okay, so the first part is we ask everyone these same questions about population beliefs. And then this is what Mohammed was asking. It was a great point. What do we do then? Well, within the survey, so you can think about, everyone's taking the survey, and then, we randomly kind of split, the people into these different groups, right? So we have 3 groups, and 2 are going to get this information treatments. Okay, so I'm going to refer to the first one as T1. And what T1 got is they got what we call the information treatment. And so this is going to be a bundle of social and labor market information. Now, for those of you who are, doing experiments, you actually, don't necessarily, it's cleaner to not bundle these things, but for our purposes, as Jamal knows, working in Saudi Arabia, it's actually hard to come across information about, kind of even like what share of college women are working. It's like you have to kind of hunt for things like that. And basically, we didn't have a lot of information that we could give them. And what we weren't sure basically what they would respond to. And so we bundled a bunch of things together in the treatment. And then after, in our analysis, we can try to see what mattered most. But we bundled together average earnings. So we gave them earnings, for women, what's the average earnings per month. We gave them information about an unemployment assistance program, which is called Hafiz. It's like a big program in Saudi Arabia. And then the social part of it is we gave them some information about what their female peers, what their expectations of working are. And I'll show you in a second kind of exactly what they saw. Okay, so that's the first group. They got this information. Now, T2, this is the second group, and they got exactly the same information, but also this prime to make their parents salient. And so what here, what you want to think about is that the women are seeing this information, and then they're asked, would you be interested in having a summary of your answers be shared with your parents? Okay. And here, again, this is more of a behavioral intervention here, because we're not actually sharing the information with their parents. We just want the students to think of their parents. So the idea is, you see this and you think, oh, do I want to share it with my parents? And you're starting to think about them and thinking about what your parents might want. Okay. So that's the goal here. Okay, so that's within the survey. We randomly do this. There's a third group, right? The control group, where they get, basically they don't get any of this information. Okay, and then in the last part of the survey, these are our outcome measures, right? And here we're going to ask everyone the same questions, and we're going to ask them now about their self-beliefs. And when I say self-beliefs, this is about, the students' own expectations about career and family. Okay. And so with this design, what we can do then, right, is we can estimate the causal impact of, say, of getting this information, T1, on these outcomes about self-beliefs, right? So that's what, this design allows us to do. Yep, Jamal.
Here, Ina, so two questions. Do you also provide the students information about their peers, about the expectations of their peers, or only you're stopping at the parents?
Yes, no, so
peers, yeah.
Yes, that's right. So this is good point. Yeah, that's in and I'll show you the text in a second of what we actually show, but that's in T1 actually, is the peers.
Yeah, and here the information that you provide about the peers, where does it come from? From the survey itself, or?
Yes, so that's an excellent question. And again, as Jamal knows, it's hard to, to get data. For example, to give information about peers, we basically had to collect it first. And so what we did, I'll tell you in a second, we did actually a small focus group initially before this survey, and I'll show you just a little bit about that. It was what we call a convenience sample. So we basically, got about 80 students, and we did a survey, but we also, did a focus group, and we took that information, and that's the information that we gave to them. So it's not ideal, but again, because there kind of isn't great data on, we didn't. So for example, KSU doesn't do a survey themselves where we could say, okay, 80% of KSU students were working when they graduated. We actually don't know that information, so we had to do it ourselves. But yeah, that's a great point. Mm-hmm.
My second question is related to the sample itself. How was KSU chosen, basically? Just because the co-authors are there?
The university. Yeah.
Because
so
it's really one of the best, at least I know, over there in Saudi Arabia. And
yes, exactly.
The elite, the most educated parents, the highest income groups so more or less like AUC here in Egypt, where all these students that you are seeing here, many of them will be basically changing the counter here in a few years. So maybe the same. So how represent?
Yeah, that's right. No, and you're right. So it's and you're right. It's one of the best universities, well known, and what we were interested in is kind of a large university. And there is, I guess I don't have it in the slides, but there is actually variation in where people are from and their parents' background. So I think, in that case, it's again, it is a selected sample. And I think actually for our purposes, given that this is kind of one of the first, we don't have many studies from Saudi Arabia yet. We actually think that these might be the women, again, who might be on the margin here about, where this information could matter maybe. But you're right, this is definitely not, we can't generalize this to all of Saudi Arabia. And a big part of this, those of you who, Jamal knows as well, those of you doing experiments, in different countries is, having collaborators at this university where you have access to a large number of women, it was really important. So yeah, that was definitely a key part of it for sure.
And just as a side note, you would be, of course, welcoming Anaida to do similar work in Egypt, right? With the behavioral.
That would be amazing. Thanks. Yeah.
Mohammed.
Okay, Ina. So you provided information about the labor market to the participants. Like, how do you measure how much confidence do they have in the information you provided them?
Yes, that's a great point. So we did ask some questions. So, it was partly to kind of make sure that the information, they were processing it. We asked some questions after we give it. Actually, I could show you maybe, oh, it's not here. Yeah, so this is actually what we gave them. Sorry, there's a lot of text, but we basically said, here are some statistics about monthly wages. And we said, this is what, the average monthly wages of a Saudi female workers with a college degree was 10,072 rials per month. So it's a lot of text, but then what we asked is we asked a few questions like, did you find this information helpful, for example? And those are kind of commonly used in a survey after you provide the information to kind of see, were they paying attention, and most people said it was helpful, but we don't have any other ways of kind of, understanding if it was very, if they were confident. I guess the one thing I would say is that what you'll end up seeing, and I'll show you a bit of this, is that, we did ask them questions before this about their beliefs about wages, right? So we had some kind of pre-intervention data that we can use to look at whether, was it the wages that mattered? One thing that we did see is that kind of the distribution of their beliefs about wages is where, there's a lot of uncertainty. Like women don't seem to have a good sense here about what wages are. But that, that's an example. But beyond that, we, again, asking how helpful it is. I mean, I think the big thing is, again, using these pre-intervention questions to look at, did this treatment affect, and you'll see this, I'm giving it away, but it was the women who had the lower, beliefs about their peers working, who were the ones who responded the most. And so that was kind of how we felt like it's the, it's the peers information that mattered most. But I can get into that. But Mohammed, did you have other things in mind that would help us understand the confidence?
Actually, you can refer them to website, like some sort of stats on website. They can read it on the website, governmental website straight away. So in this case, they are sure this is accurate information.
I see. So you're saying, that basically something that they know is reputable, that would be,
yes,
that's a good point. Yeah, that's, and this came up a bit. I mean, I think one reason even that we got a lot of respondents, and Jamal knows this as well, that, this was, it was kind of sold to them as, a Harvard study. And I think that was kind of, for them, was, important. And so we were kind of hoping that they kind of believed it, because of that. But I think that's a great point. In future work, I think this idea of referring them to an official website is a great idea. So I'm going to note that down. Thanks.
Mona?
Yes. Hello, Ina. Mona Said.
Hi, Mona.
Mona Said. I also teach labor economics here, and quite a few of my students are attending.
Great.
And I work also in experiments with JPAL on labor market issues, but not necessarily female labor force participation. But certainly you have a lot of captured audience here who are interested, the students, to know about how to properly do this type of investigations. So just for their sake, and also my own understanding, do you think there was some concept of reservation wages that you're asking about, the minimum wages that the women would agree to provide their labor for? Did you, for example, ask them themselves about this, what is the minimum wage? Did you ask them in the baseline survey, or, whenever you wanted to bring even their peers information specifically about that? Did that enter as part of the information? Because it's really interesting to know whether you also, there was a comparative aspect, in the sense that you, when you reported the average wage, so we hear it's 10,000 rials for, female university graduate in Saudi. Did you, for example, provide information about how does that compare to a male graduate? Because this comparison also can be very interesting. So I was just wondering if the reservation concept and the comparative concept was brought up in the information at all.
Yes, no, that's a great point. So we didn't provide that. Yeah, so all we provided them with was for women, but that's a great point. We did ask them, we didn't ask them about kind of what their reservation, what would be the minimum that, you would be willing to work for. And that would have been a great question to ask. We just asked what their expectations are about what they would be earning if they were working. And what's in, now that you're mentioning is we didn't actually look at these carefully, but we also asked what they thought men would be earning, and it was definitely higher. But that's a great point. Like there might be some interesting variation there. Again, we didn't give the information for men, and so we'd have to think about. Like you could imagine maybe they're going to update their beliefs about maybe in a different way if you give both. But that's a great point, and we didn't ask that. And I think for future work, you're right. We should have something about the kind of minimum would be useful.
Just to give you just a hint about what we found in Egypt, theoretically, you'd expect women to have a higher reservation wage than men because they have more expenses, higher opportunity cost. But in fact, consistently in our experiment in Egypt, women had a lower reservation. They reported a lower reservation wage, and we're trying to explain that. Maybe it has to do with their own confidence, expectation of discrimination, but it's something really worth looking at, in the MENA region in general. So I'm very, very interested to see your work when it's available and published.
Yeah, no, and I'd love to. That sounds very interesting. I'd love to read your paper because that's that's
not done yet.
Okay, I'll look for. Yeah, and I don't know. One thing that we found is and I'd be curious if it's similar, is that it did seem like there was just a lot of uncertainty. Like it wasn't, and we actually thought that this should matter then. The kind of this when we give this information about the wages, but yeah, there was really like a lot of this the standard deviation and like what people reported was like really wide. But what did seem was encouraging. It seemed like we asked the expectations of wages by major, or actually by by the kind of large occupation groups, and it did seem like they kind of matched with what the actual differentials were. So that seemed like, okay, maybe actually there is some information there that some women are informed about it. But very fascinating, and I'd love to talk with you more about your work. Thanks, Mona.
Thank you.
Mustafa?
I have a question about the assumptions of the experiment. Since it's a university, the survey is taking place in a university, wouldn't the participants already be generally inclined towards education and work? So, and how would the results would then be weighted to apply to a general population, which is not inclined to education?
Yeah, no, that's a great point. And this is kind of, again, why we actually think it's useful to look at this group of women, because, the labor force participation rates among university graduates, they're, higher than other Saudi women, but they're really quite low still if you look, compared to other countries. So I think it's like, I think I had on this slide. I don't have it here. Okay. I think it was like 38% of college graduates were working in 2018. So it's still not, it's not very high. And so actually it's an interesting group to look at, because what you just said, you would think that, these are the women who are the most likely, but it's still not very likely for these women compared to international standards. So, so we still think it's a useful group to look at. In terms of generalizing, and this is what Jamal was saying earlier, that yeah, sure, this is a selected sample, but if we think about, again, who should be most responsive to kind of this, if there's some bias in beliefs, these should be the women who should respond the most. And so we actually think, to start, this is a useful group to look at. But sure, I think, expanding this, and, Jamal is doing some work, and others are doing work to try to look at kind of other, a wider population, I think, which would be interesting. So yeah, thanks. That's a great question.
Dina, and then Abir.
Thank you, Jamal, and thank you, Ina, for the very interesting topic, actually. Like my colleague, Dr. Mona, I also teach labor economics at AUC, and mainly my areas of research are about women and their participation in the labor force. So this is adding an extra layer of interest for me in your topic. One thing that I was thinking about was highlighting the social aspect, or having the social information. And I see it not only about marriage or social relations, but I also see some evidence of pluralistic ignorance here, where people are behaving in a certain way, believing that this is the commonly accepted in the society. So
Yes.
what kind of evidence or what kind of questions have you used in order to see the stigma or the stereotyping of women in such societies, in patriarchal societies like Saudi Arabia?
Yes, no, it's a very important point. And so we did ask some questions about attitude, cultural attitude. So I'll show you a bit of that. But I think, the point that you mentioned about, kind of this stigma and also this idea that, you'll see one of our main initial results, not even having to do with the experiment, that when I, get to that, but that basically women are, they have higher expectations of themselves working compared to what they think their peers, their expectations are. So there is this disconnect, and this is in the paper I mentioned about the husbands of Saudi, women and kind of their misperceptions about social norms is kind of consistent with this, that, it seems like it's a case that kind of privately, again, the norms are, people are okay with kind of working and they want to work, but then they think that society is not, ready for that basically. And this is actually the Fernandez paper I mentioned is kind of a nice one here, that you have this disconnect, and actually the information doesn't seem to be flowing. In the Fernandez model, a big thing is that there's this intergenerational learning, so women kind of see what the older cohort is doing, but it seems like here we have a case where that model may not, kind of be working. And this is what we're trying to contribute to. But I think, what you said, I think is super important. And I'll show you a bit about what we did, but I think there's a lot more, obviously, that can be done around these questions. So.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
Let's take also one additional question from Abir before giving you really the chance to continue.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, thank you, Ina, very much for this interesting topic. I just want to ask, do you provide the participants with information on what religion thinks of hard work, and that religion actually encourages people to work and does not discriminate against women, or that religion, Islam, does not think women should not work, and so on? Because I think Saudis are very much influenced by religion, and to some extent they don't want to work because they think it's religion that dictates so.
Yes, no, that's very interesting. We've talked a bit also with Jamal about kind of these, in Saudi Arabia, trying to understand these more. In this study, we did not do that. I can show you, though, we did ask, kind of related to what Dina was asking, we did ask some questions of the students about, kind of cultural attitudes. And so one of them was, and it's from it's not from World Values Survey, but we have a question that's used, it's validated and kind of used around the world. And it's that work is consistent with religious norms. So I'll show you some of that. So you can see kind of in this sample what women are reporting. And what you'll see with those questions actually is that our treatments actually impact, the answers to those questions were actually impacted by our treatments. So they're, and what you'll see is that basically, when women were asked to think of their parents, it actually changed. So, what we're using it as is a way to show, like, our parents' prime did actually seem to impact what they were thinking about in terms of norms. So I'll show you some of that, but I think that's a fascinating area to look into. And I think, for future research, I think that would be really, in Saudi would be interesting. So thank you. That's a great point. Let me, okay, so I'm going to move on a bit. Just let me get to the results, because I think, a lot of interesting discussion here. So I'm curious, I want to get your thoughts. So just to make sure that everyone kind of knows then what the treatment. So again, we randomly gave this one group basically this information, and it's a bundle. So the first part you can think about as social information. So it's a lot of text, but the point is that we gave them information that said, female students at KSU reported a very high likelihood. It was about 80%. So it was very high. And this is based on our focus group again, but this idea that aspirations are high of working for pay when they're 25. And then we gave some other information about expectations of getting married and having their first child. And then we gave, like I said, this information about monthly wages. Mona had a great point. It would have been nice to give something about minimum, but we gave them this average, which was about 10,000 Rial. And then we also gave them this information about Hafiz, which was a job assistance program. So that was kind of, what we call, the social and labor market information. Now, this is the key part of, again, when I said the literature we're trying to look at is, right, this interaction between the information and the norms. And so this is that treatment. So the other group got the same, information that was on the previous slide, but we then said, okay, the answers you provide in this section might be helpful for you in discussing your post-college plans and career options with your parents. Would you be interested in having a summary of your answers be shared with your parents? And then we asked another question, what would be the best way of sharing this information with your parents? And it said like email, Now, we did not actually share the information with their parents. That would have been we actually didn't do anything with the parents themselves. And so that might've been a nice next step. But for this study, we just ended here. And the idea, again, is it was supposed to make the students in this group think about their parents. So you see this question, you answer it, and then, you're thinking about your mother and your father. And it's supposed to bring to mind your parents' expectations of working, which is like the social norms. Okay, so what are our results? So first, this is nothing to do actually with the treatments, but we thought it was very striking that the students had much higher expectations, well, first of all, of working, and this is partly because of the, or definitely because of the setting, right? It's a university university students who, are the ones who are likely to be working. So they have very high expectations, okay? But the piece that is really interesting, we thought, again, descriptive, not having to do with the experiment, but respondents' beliefs about themselves, so these are what we call the self-beliefs, they're significantly higher than the population beliefs. So what does that mean? That so the self-belief of working at age 25 in our sample was 67.7%. Okay, so this is about, women said, what's the likelihood of that, you're going to work when you're 25? About, 67.7% said that they wanted to work or they expected to work. But then we asked them, what share of your peers do you think will be working at age 25? It's much lower. It's 54.2%. So this was a comment earlier. I think Dina came up a few times that, basically the idea that what they believe privately is not consistent with what they think about their peers and social norms. So there's this disconnect that was quite striking. And so this is just to show you, I'm going to show you some tables like this, but this is the beliefs about women working. And so this is for the whole sample. This is for the control. This was all pre-treatment. This was pre-intervention. So basically there's no significant differences across our groups, right? So this is the control group. This is T1, T2, this is the p-value. And so what you can see is that everyone got the same questions and there's no significant difference, which is good. It's encouraging, right? It means that, the randomization, it's balanced on these questions before. And so again, you can see that they're quite low, right? So the beliefs about women working full-time, about 27%, and this is their peers. So they have very low expectations about what their peers are planning in terms of working. And then this is the monthly earnings. This is, you see, much lower than what you saw in the information we gave. Okay, and this is the self-belief. So again, these questions are asked after the intervention. So these again are, we need, if we want to look at kind of comparisons to this population before, we have to really look at the control group. This is kind of, this is where they don't get any information. The stars are just indicating whether they're significantly different from the population. And so what you can see is, if we look at the control group, these are all much higher, right, than the population. So they, in the control group, 67.7, as I said, % chance of working at age 25. What you can already start to see that I'm going to show you in a regression, but what you can start to see is look at T1, this is the information group, and T2 is the information plus the parent's prime, and this is the p-value of the joint significance. What you can see is that look at the chance of working full-time, conditional on working, chance of working full-time, the control group, and also with, the chance of working at age 25, the control group is always lower, right, than T1 and T2. And so you can already see the effects of the interventions that I'll show you in the regression. But basically, we don't see a significant impact in just the chance of working, but where we see significant impacts are in the chance of working full-time and conditional working. So the information seems to have mattered. It didn't seem to matter for earnings. So what you can see here is that yeah, look like women, it's not the salary that seems to be having an impact. Okay, so I'll get to the, I'll show you some more results in a second, but basically that's what we're finding is that the information matters. The expectations about labor force participation are higher in the information group. And this is where, going back to our hypothesis, we had actually thought that T2 and the control group should be similar, right? We thought that the information, once you make parents salient, we thought that that would mute the impact of the information. So we thought that the T2 group shouldn't be different from the control group. But actually, if you look at the point estimates, they are actually, in every case, they're higher. So it's actually that the parents' treatment seems to actually be amplifying the effects of the information rather than muting the effects of the information. So this was very counter to our initial hypothesis, okay? Okay, now, so as I said, yeah, so, the effects are often larger than T1 in the T2 group, but this is then the very interesting piece for us. And this, I think, goes with, some of the great questions from, Dina and others, is that even though the expectations of working are higher in the parents group, the cultural norms are really seeming to, to matter in this parents group. So when women are primed to think of their parents, they're reporting wanting to work, but it's in specific sectors. It's in education, which, many of you, I'm sure you know that education is where most of the women are working, who are working. And that's considered in line with cultural norms, right? To be a teacher is considered, kind of a good job to go out, be working outside of the home. Also the public sector. So in Saudi Arabia, a public sector job is considered, very, very good. And so this is where we think this is the interesting twist, is that even though the parents' prime does lead to these higher expectations of working, which is a surprise, it's only in these fields, in these areas that are in line with cultural norms. So that's kind of like the headline result. Let me show you a figure that kind of shows the basic results. So this is, the cumulative density function here. And so here, what you can see, this is the chance of working full time given working. So these are women's, they were basically asked to respond, what do you think is the chance that you will be working full time? And then we made it conditional on working. And then this is the probability, right? And what you can see is that this is the control group. And what you can see is that the T1, which is the information only, and then the T2, which is the parents' prime, those are to the right of the control group. So basically, and you can even see the T2 is always to the right of the control group. So it's stochastically dominating. So what this is saying is that kind of at all of these points of what women were reporting of the chance of working full time, the information and the parents' prime are going to push them to kind of higher reported expectations of working full time. So that's kind of one of the key results. This is the regression, just you can see, from what I told you before. So this is T1, this is T2. And again, what you can see is that the point estimates of T2 are always higher than T1, but we actually, if you do the significant, a joint significant, a significance test, we actually can't reject the null that these are the same. So we can't say that T2 is higher, but it definitely, both of the treatments are increasing the average expectations of working. Sorry, this is probability of working full time, and this is of given work and working full time. Sorry, do we have Dina have a question?
Yes, I'm sorry to interrupt you again.
No,
I was just thinking of the results regarding the parents and how it's being positive against your expectations on it. But I was thinking, was there another layer of what kind of full-time job specifically are you talking about? So have you tried correlating it with the kind of job that they have in mind? So maybe their parents wouldn't have different opinion if they chose a job that is a female-friendly job. But you would see a negative impact if they chose jobs that are not socially accepted as female jobs.
Yes, Dina, and so I think we could have done more with that. These questions are just generally, but you're totally right. And again, this is, I think, one of the most interesting parts of this is that we did ask their expectations of working in specific sectors, and I only am reporting a few. We asked them a range of them, but we asked about education, health, services. And so here, exactly as you're saying, I think if I get it right, that the parents prime, which is T2, that leads to a higher expectation of working in education. And the mean is 22, so this is the high. So most women expect it's 22%, but still health is 14% on average. But look at the parents prime increases by 4 percentage points. So it increases by a significant amount, but not the information only. So this we really thought is very striking, that exactly what you're saying is that the parents, it's something about the parents thinking that these norms are such that education would be considered a female friendly job. It's okay, but not for example services. So services, it captures a range of things, but retail is in there as well. And here you can see actually they're less likely to report services. So again, that's what I think what you're saying is that there's this. It's not just working in general, it's the kind of job, right, that you're going to do, and whether that's in line with cultural norms.
And
so
public sector, as usual, as expected.
Yes, exactly.
Very positive and very significant.
Yes. So do you find that compelling, Dina, with your?
Yes.
Yes, great. Okay,
that's thank you.
Good. No, thank you very much. Thank you. Okay, any? Oh.
Yes, Rania, please. Rania, you're maybe on mute.
Yes. Thanks a lot, for a very interesting presentation on the topic. Just clarification question. So when you ask them about do you accept sharing the information with your parents, what was the percent of those who agreed on sharing the information, and when did you ask this question?
Yes.
Did they know before answering the other questions? Did they decide about this before answering the remaining questions? Because I'm still puzzled a little bit by how the two treatment group are quite comparable.
Yes. So let me actually just look. It was a pretty high share that said they would want to, and it was asked. So basically, they were given the information, and then they were asked for these self-beliefs. And so I guess, are you going towards that? Maybe they thought their parents would be seeing their answers. Is that what you're? And that's
yes, they were exactly like the first, the second, the first treatment, and then later they decide to be different. But originally they were more or less the same, right? The same experiment applied to them.
You mean with the self versus population, or?
Which information, which questions exactly? The first, yes. Not the first set. I mean the second set, right?
Yeah. So first they were. Oh, sorry. Yeah. So they were first asked. Everyone was asked, "What do you think of the share of your peers?" And so that was kind of this thing where. It was kind of very low. And then for the self-belief, so the control group, they didn't get anything. So you can still see that even in the control group where they weren't asked about their parents at all, they weren't told anything about the parents, it's still much higher. But I think where you're going, and I think this is a totally valid concern, and we can't differentiate between that they wanted to please their parents, right? That it's possible that they thought their parents would be seeing the answers, and so they wanted to please their parents. I think we were just surprised because we thought that still they wouldn't necessarily want to, that we didn't think that thinking of their parents would lead them to report higher levels of wanting to work. But I guess the question is that, and I'll show you, we did a follow-up survey to try to dig into this. And that does seem to be the explanation, is that they actually want their parents, they think their parents would be proud if they are working. And I think it's, this issue of in education or the public sector, right? But that's very different from kind of the prior generation. So going back to, Fernandez and thinking about kind of over time, this seems to be something that's new right now. This is, among these KSU students, it seems like it's really that their parents do want them to work, and they know that, and they want to make them proud. So yeah, so I think, Rania, great point. And we do discuss in the paper a bit that we can't differentiate between that explanation, that it's their own personal choice or that they want to please their parents. But yeah, thanks
just
for
like
bringing that up.
yeah, it's just like يعني your voice or maybe my يعني my internet cut a little bit, so it wasn't really clear for me. Like, so you ask them the questions about the parents after answering the first set, after answering the treatment questions, right?
So the treatment is, so the parents is the, so not everyone answered.
Not the treatment. I mean, after giving the treatment information, right?
Yes, so they were given the information. One subset got the parents' question. Another one didn't get the parents' question. So only a third, only the T2 group got the parents' question. The other ones didn't.
Okay. Just like I feel like it might be sort of like if I said something that might please my parents, I will share it with them. So they are sort of self-selecting themselves from the start. That's why you're getting a no. And if I said something that I don't want to share with my parents, then I will say no. It's not like, right?
Yeah,
So,
we do a little bit of that in the, yes.
So
and we
like
don't,
a little bit of like an experiment that is sort of a, I don't want to say it's a trivial, but it's you're getting my points. Like if I'm planning to say something that will please my parent, then I will share it. If not, then I will not share it. So it's not really too much of an experiment.
Yes. Well, but so the idea though, okay. Yeah, I mean, I think the idea though is when it's an experiment in that, so we don't actually share it, but the idea was that we actually thought that they wouldn't, that they would report lower expectations of working, right? So the idea is that this is actually showing the opposite, that that they do want to please their parents. And we can cut the data by who wanted to share versus who didn't. And you're right, it's the ones who wanted to share that reported these higher expectations of working. But I think ex ante, it wasn't clear to us that would, and maybe it is to you, I don't know, maybe, I guess, right, would you have said that initially, that the ones who want to share with their parents would report higher expectations of work?
No, you're right. Yes, no, I wouldn't really. I would still think otherwise. It's still interesting result, but it's just like we need to be careful about that. That's the whole thing. Yes. About who shared the information. Yeah, but it's clearly against our expectation of the results. It's good to have.
Yes, but I could, and I think you're right. I think showing by the who wanted to share it. Yeah, we have that in the paper, but I think that's a great point to show that.
Thank you.
Okay.
Maybe, Ina, it would be great if you can go to conclude, and then Mona and to get more questions.
Okay, excellent. Okay, yeah, so I just have a little bit more. I just want to show you this, that, so, we have this kind of average, effect of the treatments. But one thing that, if you think about that bundle, like what of that bundle of information mattered the most? And this is where, kind of back to those comments before, it seems like the social information matters the most, that people don't know really what their peers are thinking. And this is in line with the other study I mentioned too. And so what we did is, this is just a bit of the heterogeneity analysis, that it looks like it's students who underestimate the expectations of their peers who are the most impacted by the treatment. Okay. And then this was exactly Rania's point too, that the parents' treatment is really impacting, it's the students who want to share. And so I think this idea of like, they want to please their parents is exactly right. It's the ones that want to share who are the ones who are impacted most. So just one figure to show you, this is the belief of women working. So this is the population. So this is pre-treatment here on the x-axis, and this is the self-belief. So this is post-treatment. And here, what we can, we're showing you is that this is the T2 group, or the green, T1, and that's the parents. T1 is the information, and this is the control group. And so what you can see, it's really the women who had the lower beliefs of the other women working. So this is, again, the women who underestimated. So these are, women on average who thought only 20% of their peers were wanting to work. They're the ones who were kind of pulled up, right? And then, so on. So it's really this idea that women were underestimating their peers. So that seems, I think, consistent with what the comments you guys are telling me. And also, I think with the other studies, that it's really about this disconnect, right? About what, how much, women kind of know about what their peers and these social norms, how much that's consistent with kind of themselves, but also what they know about their peers. And I just want to show you this one last thing, because there were questions about this. So we did ask these attitudes about various, we call social factors. And so these, you might know these questions about, you know, would your family approve of you working? And then this is, you know, Likert, like 0 to 10, how important is your parents' approval? Is work consistent with local norms? And is work consistent with religious norms? And so here, I just want to show you, because what you can see is that it does seem, I mean, it's not really, you know, it's only marginally significant, but it does look like T2 is higher on these scores than the other groups. And it, you know, again, if we look at the control versus T2, it looks like the parents' prime is kind of bringing those social norms top of mind, right? And so again, this is like another way of trying to get at, like, you know, is the parents' prime doing what we think it's doing? And here actually, and this is, you know, that excellent point about is work consistent with religious norms? And I think this is actually really interesting with that previous point, that, you know, this is higher for the parents' prime. So it's that, you know, that actually it's not, we would have thought that it would be lower, but it's actually higher. So the parent, you know, it is that the parents, when they're thinking about their parents, they are actually thinking that it's more consistent with religious norms. So I think we thought, you know, that's not a big part of the paper, but I just wanted to show it to you because it's consistent with what you were saying. Okay, so let me kind of wrap up. I'm not going to go through all of this. I think we talked about this a bit, but, you know, one thing we did do is we did a follow-up survey then with 150 students, because, you know, our co-authors who are at KSU, they're Saudi, they were also surprised by the parents' result. And so we kind of weren't sure how to interpret that. And so we wanted to ask the you know, some student, different set of students, but we asked them, you know, kind of some follow-ups, like, what did you think about this information? And basically what, you know, and again, this could be because it's, again, this large, you know, elite university, but almost all of them said that they believe that their parents expect them to work. So this is, you know, kind of a striking change, we'd say. And then this was also interesting, is that a lot of them reported that they wanted to discuss their plans with their parents. And so this seemed like something that was kind of, you know, for future work, the kind of more interactions with parents where they kind of have a structured way to discuss career seemed like could be encouraging. And then, you know, why would they want to do that? Because they want to inform them about how Saudi society is changing, make them happy to know that more people think like me. So again, it's something about, again, these social norms that seems to matter. Okay, let me just end, because I think we're towards the end. I'm more curious to hear you know, further thoughts, because this is very useful, the discussion. Let's see, Jamal, are you gonna call on? Oh,
We have a question from Mona, and then from
Yes, I'm sorry. I'm trying to, you know, I had another meeting that started, but this was so interesting. I just stayed on, and I just want to say that, you know, what comes across as a very strong result is the importance of occupational segregation in the minds of both women and their parents, maybe their peers. So, you know, I would imagine if we do a study of the gender pay gap, for example, in Saudi Arabia, as expected, occupational segregation would hold a very big part. So that's, you know, a clear area for, you know, policy implications of those results, occupational segregation. I also just want to say that I'm sure Ina felt she heard a lot, and I'm sure she, you know, when she tries to publish the work, and I'm sure it will go very well, you know, this idea of priming the parents is going to be the really unique but also questionable part. I mean, initially when I heard how you've done it, I felt it was a little bit oppressive, you know, on the women, that, you know, they were already told that there is a chance. They didn't know they would not share the information, but they felt they're under the duress that their parents are going to listen. And I wonder if this was too much of a, you know, of a heavy-handed way of making them think about the parents. It might have colored everything. And I think, you know, the last table you showed was, you know, showed an attitude maybe of this group T2, that they're more conformist, that they're trying to show everything in good light, the religion in good light, the society in good light, their parents in good light, you know. So they're more kind of conformist in their attitude. not a behavior economist, but I wonder what Muhammad and others would think about that. That there's a lot coming up. But but later on, when you showed their attitude and their feeling that they want to share more with their parents, I'm starting to think, yes, you were right in making them think about the parents, because the parents are very much there in their decision. And when you think about social change and how can you encourage female labor force participation, I think there is no doubt that something needs to be done also outside the women themselves, in their societies, in raising awareness and about the misconceptions. So I just wanted to give you a piece of my mind about how it kind of developed in my mind, this idea of involving the parents. I was completely against it, but I started seeing some use to it. So thank you for an excellent presentation.
Thank you so much, Mona, for your comments. And yeah, I'll follow up with you on your work, because it sounds like, yeah, I can learn a lot from you. So thank you very much. That was great.
Thank you. Thank you, Mona.
The one's learning.
Thank you, Mona. Abir? Muhammad?
Okay. This is very interesting, Ina, and amazing. Can we go back to the main results, regression results slide, please?
Yes.
Okay.
This is the main, yeah.
Okay.
Sorry, the constant, we have it up. Yeah, here's T1 and T2.
So T1, just to make sure that I understood everything correctly, T1 is giving them information about the labor participation of women in the labor market, and T2 is making parents information plus making parents salient as well. I wonder why you didn't give them like a T3, which is only making parents information salient without the information about participation of women, just to tease out only how this kind of parents factor is affecting them.
Yeah, no, that's a great point. I mean, to be honest, initially we weren't sure that we would have enough power. So we were, we went away with it. And I think because our initial hypothesis was that we were going with this idea that the parents' treatment should mute the impact of the information. That was our, that's really what we were expecting. And so, so we didn't think it was necessarily, just the parents alone. But you're right. I think if, that would have been a better, a more clean design, because then we could actually look at separately the impact of parents.
Okay, and the second point, now you mentioned something very interesting about the sector they are expecting to work in. So I was looking forward to see like some sort of regression, probability regression, or something, like given the sector, what are the differences in treatment, like for each sector, what given that they are going to work in the education sector, what are the differences and their treatment and a probability of working full time or the other factors that you use.
I see. So so this is what I had shown, which is just by treatment.
Conditional. I'm sorry. I mean conditional logic. Yeah, conditional logic. Yeah.
Okay. So you're saying like, yes. Okay. So not just bringing expectation of working in the sector, but also then bringing in the other. Yeah, that's a great point. We haven't done that. So let me. Yes, that would be, I think, really useful to do. Okay, to see if then, conditional on working. Yeah, we can definitely do that. We haven't done it, so I think
that's very interesting. And last thing, if you see Angela de Oliveira, I don't know. She's my we graduate together. We are really good friends. So if you see her, send her my regards.
I do sometimes see her on Zoom now, but yes, well, yeah. Oh wow, I didn't realize that. No, she's amazing. Great colleague. Yeah, we're in different
She is
departments,
amazing.
but
I
well, you'll have
know
to.
she's agricultural economics, isn't she?
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah.
So you'll have to come visit us in Amherst sometime.
Definitely. I have to extended invitation to stay with Angela and her beautiful family. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. No, I look forward to that. Great. Yeah, it's a small world. So
Wonderful, wonderful.
thanks, Mohammed.
Dina?
Yes, again, being obsessed like Dr. Mona with the parents part,
Yes.
I was thinking of the definition of the sample itself at the beginning. And as you and Jamal were talking, this university is already like AUC. So we are talking about parents who already are convinced with the daughter's education. They've sent them to a certain level or certain degree of university. So they know the quality of higher education they're going for. So they definitely have expectations for their labor market at the end. So I think this could be one of the reasons why you're seeing such positive impact of parents, because the mentality of the parents itself has driven this choice of going into university education for their daughters.
Yeah. So it's, so you're saying basically, got it. No, I think you're right. I think this is, again, with this sample. So I guess, it's kind of suggesting, I think when, I'm hoping that we can kind of come in with it, at least in this kind of selected set, it's not that parents are the barrier. They're actually kind of, for this group. And this is maybe, again, why we're seeing for the younger cohorts, we're seeing much higher labor force participation rates already. And so, so I think you're right. And this is, also, a good reason to say that we need to kind of expand to other, other populations. So thank you, Dina. No, your comments were really helpful and give me a lot to think about. So thank you.
Thank you, Ina. And the presentation was very interesting. The topic is very interesting, and it's definitely catching the attention of everyone interested in this field and in this topic.
Thank you so much. Appreciate it. Thanks. I think, Jamal, you're muted.
Yes. Al-Anout, yes.
Yes, I have. I think first, thank you so much for this informative presentation. It's very intriguing as a graduate student to know more about it and read more about this topic. My question was regarding the spillovers. Were you not worried that the information you shared with the treatment group could have been easily transferred to the control group, since they're all in the same university, and this information is also very easily transmitted? So did you check for the spillovers? Thank you.
Yeah, no, that's a great question. And, actually, so we don't use any outcomes that are outside of the survey. I mean, ideally, we actually would have followed up with them to see if they actually got a job. But everything that I'm showing you today actually was within the same survey. So it's, we're kind of measuring these out. We're measuring these outcomes before they would have a chance to talk. Although I guess, you could imagine that they were doing it like on their phones together or something. But we were kind of thinking that it within the survey, they probably weren't talking a lot. But I think you're right. I think the only thing then is we would have actually thought that the control group would have higher, if there's spillovers, there would be higher expectations of working. So it would basically bias us away from finding a difference. So that, that would be the one thing. But you're right. I think it's a great point to always worry about these spillovers. And I mean, to be honest, I think we're hoping that they did then diffuse, given that we're not following up, like we're hoping that maybe this information did kind of spread further. We didn't do any follow-up, but I think, I didn't get to my policy implications slide, but one thing that, we're talking about is that, kind of more discussions with peers about, kind of what they're planning, what they're expecting about working seems to be an important part of this in terms of, if we want to actually think about helping women to enter the labor force if they want to. That seems to be a big part of it. So I think you're right that spillovers, in our setting, again, it wasn't too much of a concern, but I actually think that's what we want in, in terms of going forward. So thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Ina. Before actually thanking you more, I would like to thank our colleague Hiba Halim for helping us put all of this together. Without you, Hiba, we wouldn't be able to do this. We will also be having another talk, and Ina, you are more than welcome to join us with Samih Tumen from Turkey. He will be showing us some work on training teachers for diversity using data about Syrian refugees and native students in Turkey. You're definitely welcome. Here at AUC Economics Department, we are hoping to be the main economics research hub on work on the region. Open invitation, Ina, to present any future work you have on the region. And of course, you have an open invitation to visit our very beautiful campus anytime you want. You have now many friends here. You have many people who are interested in your work, starting with Bina, Muna, Abir, Muhammad. You have also a lot of students who would love to meet with you in person. Thank you so much, Ina. And we would look so forward to being in contact and to learning more and more about your work. And we look forward to seeing this work published as well. Thank you.
Thank you so much to everyone. Thank you, Jamal, to Hiba, to everyone for your comments. And yeah, I look forward to being in touch. I learned a lot, and this was really very, very helpful. And hope to get to see you all in person soon. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ina.
Thank
you so much.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you so much.
Bye.
Thank you so much. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Jamal.